So as we kind of alluded to in the email, technical fouls and teamwork, the rule book portion we rarely use, and then what we feel are some of the keys to a successful game, especially when that part of the rule book comes into play. So.
All right, well, I'll start us off here, I guess, on the administrative side. Again, some of the baseline things that we get started with, we have our pregame, we get excited, we do all of our stuff leading up to the game, but we need to make sure that once we get out on the floor, prior to tipping the ball off, we get all of our books taken care of, counting our players, doing all that. I'm kind of jumping around here, but all of our scorebook stuff that we want to get taken care of. So we've heard that 10 is the magic number. So we need to make sure by the 10-minute mark, that's our timeline to get ourselves over as a referee to check the scorebook. So we're going to start with counting our players when we get out on the floor, making sure that our players in the rule book are matching up how many we have on each team. And this is a time for us as officials to be proactive. So if we notice that something is off and we don't have the matching numbers corresponding with what's out on the floor, if we can start a game off without an administrative or a team technical, we're going to be starting off on the right foot. Sometimes it's not preventable, but this is our time to be proactive and go grab that coach and say, hey, I see 15 players on the floor, but you only got 13 in the book or whatever it might be. So use that as a proactive time to do that. Just a reminder on these, as you can see there, one foul covers all of these infractions that we'll be talking about. So it's a team foul. It's not directed at any one player. So if we're administering a technical foul for and changing a starter after the 10-minute mark, or adding a number to the rule book or a name to the rule book after the 10-minute mark, that's when we're going to have a team technical foul, counts towards the team total. Some of the other ones there that come up that are very rare, Eric, if you're moving along there on the slide, is I have yet to see a megaphone being used, but maybe someone here in this storied group of guys and gals might have seen it over the years. But I think it's kind of funny to see someone using a megaphone as a technical foul. If you can put that one in your wheelhouse before you are done officiating, make sure you let me know, because that would be a good one. Some other team administrative stuff is the delay of game warnings that can happen. Just a reminder on those delay of game technical fouls, we got to have a warning in the book prior to issuing that technical foul. So we might have, there's 4 different delay of game warnings, but we might have, it doesn't need to be you could have a warning for fouling a basket and the ball being batted away, but then later in the game, you might have a boundary line or a throw-in plane warning, a violation, which could result in a technical foul, or a huddling during a free throw, or the other one would be if the court isn't ready, following the timeout. So just a reminder there, if we have one delay game warning in the book, or actually I should say we need a delay game warning in the book before we can issue that type of technical foul. More than 5 players on a court also would be a team technical foul. I think this can be prevented quite often. Why do we count players when we come out of timeouts? For that exact reason. And a reminder on this 5-player technical foul, we have to make sure that it's something that we observe. So you might have a situation where you come out of a timeout, that 6 players on the court, and for some reason a coach catches it before you do and calls in another immediate timeout, and you go into that timeout and the opposing coach might say, hey, they just had 6 players on the floor. Well, by then that window for penalizing that has been missed. So we need to make sure that we observe that 6 players on the floor. And then the excessive timeout, I know this was probably 10 years ago. Jared, you can nod, just you don't have to get on, but I know John Fox and a crew down in lacrosse had a situation end of the game where a player called an excessive timeout and they issued a technical foul. It does happen. The only thing I could say to issuing a technical foul in that situation is it would have to be a pretty egregious, well, egregious isn't the right word, a pretty blatant or observable excessive calling of a timeout by a player. So if a coach just faintly is unaware that he might have a timeout and he just says, hey, timeout, and you're like, hey, coach, you don't got any more, you're probably not going to be in a situation where you're going to issue a technical. But now if it's a player that rebounds the ball late in the game and it's that 1-2 point situation and he emphatically is giving the old timeout with the ball and yelling it and screaming it, it might be a little tougher to walk away from that, especially if the other coach is aware of it. So that is another administrative or team technical. And then the one that I have never seen, and I'd be interested in if anyone's ever seen this, is teammates locking or grasping each other to create the old two-man block to go down the floor and stop another team. So that's another administrative team technical. Anything in the chat on those as we're moving ahead, Jared or MJ, whoever's monitoring that?
No, nothing in the chat, Tristan. I might just mention too, though, sometimes with excessive timeout, you can save yourself by being aware of how many timeouts coaches have left. So just doing our due diligence of talking during those final timeouts. Coach, you've got one left, you've got two left, you have one of each left. Coach, you're out. Those kind of things can not only put it in the coach's mind where they're at, but it can put it in the crew's mind as well. Because in the heat of the moment, you know, a team's clawed back and they hit a bucket towards the end, and the coach out of habit yells timeout, and you out of habit respond immediately. You can kind of keep yourself out of the soup there too by just looking at them and going, Coach, you're out. And if they're adamant that they want it and they understand, you know, that they're going to be penalized. One time in my career, I've had a coach say, I know, I accept the penalty. I want timeout. So just knowing that ahead of time so that we don't get caught off guard, you know, just understanding the situation can kind of keep you out of that soup as well.
Yeah, great reminder, MJ. You know, and I think we've used the term quickie quizzes, but that's the old end of the game quickie quiz conference. Can eliminate all of those type of situations you're just talking about. Moving on towards some substitute technicals. Again, I think some of these that we see can be preventative. I think we've all had situations, especially you know, when it's a JV game or a lower level game, sometimes we see those kids that might just be forgetting it. So the technicality is, yes, they might just run on the floor, but we also want to be, we're part of educators and helping these kids learn the game of basketball. So I have, in my career, I have not issued a substitute technical foul where they've, you know, ran onto the floor without being beckoned. I've always made it a point, and I'm sure a lot of us that are on this call have, is you make sure they well aware know that they need to get back and check in. And there's nothing wrong with, you know, delaying that inbounds and having them go back and legally check in. A reminder on these penalties for the failure to check in or entering the court without being beckoned. It's interesting. That's really changed, I think, on the whole beckoning onto the floor, where in our fast-paced society now, you know, we're also anxious to get into the game and get on with it, where that's kind of become, I won't say a thought of the past, but quite often, you know, how many times in a game are you reminding the players to, hey, sit down, I got to report my foul, and then I'll bring you in onto the floor. So that whole beckoning thing has kind of changed even in the 20 some years that I've been officiating. But a reminder on these, they have to be observed before the ball comes live to be able to penalize them. If for some reason a sub is able to come onto the floor and the coach of the other team might remind you after the balls come live, it's too late to penalize them for that violation. So Eric, you want to jump in there? Anything on the substitute text you can think of?
No, just the only thing I might add is you get a feeling in your JV game for what kind of table crew you have. if you have a table crew that's hitting the horn and not taking care of business with the subs at the table and kind of letting everybody run wild and players aren't checking in, your antennas should go up so that you can be even more preventative there. I had a game last week where we had a great table and a kid went to run on the court, and it was a mom, and she said, "Taylor, sit your butt down and wait." So I knew right then and there that we were going to have a great night with our substitutes because we had an active table and they knew the rules and they were ready to make the subs wait till we brought them on the court. But it's not always necessarily just your substitutes and your players you have to worry about. If you have a inexperienced or weaker table crew, maybe coach them up a little bit in between the JV and varsity games. So
the other thing too I'll add is with COVID, with some of our gyms that don't have a lot of space in front of the table, the kids have kind of gotten used to coming and reporting to the score and going back to that end of the table. And I had an instance this past week as well, where instead of the kid going up and reporting and going back to the end of the table, just came to the end of the table. And as soon as I started to report, the kid ran onto the floor. So I'm like, out of the corner of my eye, I see somebody run by and I'm like, okay. And I look at the score and I go, did somebody just come on the court? And they go, yeah, and they never checked in. So again, like what Eric was saying, the table was on it too. So I went and got the kid, came back, said, make sure you come and check in, make it a teachable moment. Coach was, said, hey, thanks for doing that. They get used to not going all the way to the table or shortcutting because somebody else has been to the table and back and they just come up there, especially if it's a younger kid. So just being extra vigilant on those subs being at the far ends of the table potentially and just walking out onto the court. So just take a minute and count noses and make sure your table's good with who's out there on the floor.
All right. Moving along, bench technicals. This also kind of overlaps a little bit with the head coach technical section, which is 10-6. I think bench technicals is 10-5. They kind of overlap a little bit, but just a reminder that, with the bench technicals, the head coach is responsible for anyone and all that are on the bench. So as you can see there, we got, assistant coaches, managers, substitutes, which would be a player that's sitting there with a jersey on, could be the statistician, right? Team trainer, anybody sitting on the end of the bench that's cheering for that team. And ultimately, the coach is responsible for the conduct of those players. So any technical foul that might be issued to a substitute player, if you're able to distinguish who it was, also is charged indirectly to the head coach. And if they are, well, it says it right there, if the coaching box would get lost, right? If we have a direct or an indirect technical foul issued to a head coach or anyone that's on the bench. Situations that might arise where we need to know where all bench personnel are, where players are considered bench personnel is during pregame and during halftime. So if you have a rocky first half and you're walking down to the locker room in between halves and you're able to identify one of the players for one of the teams and they turn around and do an unsporting act, that also is charged indirectly to the head coach because now he's responsible for all those players or substitutes, if you will, during the halftime intermission. So posed a question there to the group. Maybe we can put it in the chat if you want, just to see if we can get an answer quick. When does a player who is disqualified for committing their 5th personal foul by rule become bench personnel? If we want to throw a quick response in the chat, we should, majority of us should all know that, but it's just a good reminder to make sure we're all aware of that. I can think of one particular situation I had. This was towards the beginning of my career where I ended up calling a disqualifying 5th foul on a kid who in turn got frustrated. And it's happened to more than just me, plenty of us, I'm sure, but he turned around and, said some unpleasant words to me after I called him for his 5th foul and in turn got himself a technical foul So technically a sixth foul to end the game or end the night for him, but we hadn't notified the coach at that point because it happened virtually immediately. So he's still considered a player by rule. So we ended up, you have to clear the lane, shoot your shooting fouls, then keep the lane cleared for your technical foul, and then the offended team to get the ball at half court. So I'm sure it's happened to more than, for several of us probably raise our hand that it's happened. I think I heard here it happened just last week in one of the games, not too far away. So interesting situations, and we want to know that we're able to handle those correctly. So in that situation, the player would still be, they're still considered a player, not bench personnel, so the coach would not lose their coaching box. So what else do we want to talk about on bench person or bench techs, people?
Just another reminder too. So you have the photo here. Clearly, this is the head coach is in some disagreement, we'll say, with what's going on from the officiating standpoint. If it's kind of mild, remember we can put a warning in the book. We have that tool here for our bench personnel now. Butson and I had a game over the holidays down at the Winona tournament, and it was an assistant coach standing and barking in the first half, and last 40 seconds of the first half, and we put a warning in the book, and I just told him, you got to stay seated. Now, it wasn't the head coach that was giving us problems at that point, but I put the warning in the book and let the head coach know, you guys have been warned for bench conduct, because that's your assistant. But just remember, we have some tools at our disposal before we get to the point where we're awarding 2 free throws in the ball to the opponent. So use those tools. I think all of us here have had official warnings in the books, and before that we've had some unofficial warnings. Coach, enough, stop. But if you put 2 hands up and say enough and kind of shut it down, and the whole gym sees you there, now you've gotten to the point where you've put yourself, if the coach goes any further, you should probably be moving through to the technical foul. Once you've put the stop sign up and they blow through it, now you need to stand up for yourself. You've already let them know your conduct's out of line and you need to stop. And if they continue on after you give them the stop sign, don't be afraid. It's just a foul. They might be looking for it. We've had coaches in the past that are trying to fire up their team because they're not playing with enthusiasm or intensity, and he or she thinks a technical foul is the way to get everybody fired up. So just know that you're just making a call, you're sticking up for yourself, and making them follow the sportsmanship rules. So
I think a few other things just of note, just a couple reminders. If for some reason a coach is charged with a direct or indirect technical foul, we've heard the adage of they have the seat belt on, right? They have to sit down, but just a reminder that you're still allowed, the coaches are still allowed to do a few things, right? They can still stand up and call the timeout. They can still stand up and respond or react real quickly, positively to a play. They can also leave the bench to help in a situation if a fight's to break out, to help calm the waters there. So yes, we do know they are allowed to sit, but we got to offer a little bit of grace if they're doing some of those things. And they can also stand to, replace a disqualified player. So just wanted to touch on those couple quick reminders as well, if for some reason a coach gets an indirect or a direct technical foul.
So Jim Fall posted in the chat about dunking during the 20-minute warm-up. Common for boys teams to dunk before the officials arrive. Anybody want to chat a little bit about that?
Yeah, you pull your cell phone out that you had sitting in the corner recording, MJ, and then you issue a foul technical. How's that?
Yeah.
So I'll speak to this one
joking.
I've had this one a few times this year. I threw it up in the chat. Yeah, technical foul on the player, on the specific player that did the dunking. So you got to get, that player's number. Even if they have a warm-up jersey on, you got to figure out the number. So that's going to go towards one of their 5 for disqualification. Now make sure it's written down as a tech, because if they get a second tech, now they're gone. At the team foul count, that goes from 0 to 1 on the board. You have a conversation with your head coach, because that player out on the court, that's part of team personnel, because we don't have 5 starters at that point. So the head coach is ultimately responsible. That's an indirect on the head coach. I'm a one of three of indirects that the coach can have. Because of that, the seatbelt is on for the game. So you get to remind the coach, now you're seated. You can rise on 2 occasions, and that's 1 to call a timeout, and 2 to spontaneously react in a positive manner to a play on the court and then sit back down. The shooting team will select the free throw shooter. It could be a starter. It could be a non-starter. They will shoot the 2 shots, and their team will get the ball at the division line throw-in, and the technical foul team will get the arrow. What did I miss?
Well, if you really want to go into the weeds, one other thing you missed is,
Please.
I believe in high school, you can also have technical foul can be shot by 2 different free throwers if they really want to go. They want to have one shoot by one, and the second one can be shot by someone else. But we're getting in the weeds there. So
You are
that's another
correct.
thing. And the head coach is allowed to pick the technical foul shooter.
What?
The coach is allowed to select who's shooting the technical fouls.
Of his team, of the
Correct.
team
Their
that's
team,
shooting.
of their
Yes,
team.
the team that's shooting.
Right. It's not the opposing coach.
Correct. Yeah. No, I hope I didn't say that. I meant the team that's shooting. Yes.
My Rich Gugersberg, yeah, both teams dunking pregame. Ha ha ha. Fun, fun, fun. All right. So,
Go home.
well, yeah, no kidding. I would pull both coaches together and explain what you're going to do. And so now you're not going to shoot the technical fouls. Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong here.
No, you're right.
But you're going to start with the team foul 1-and-1 up on the board. Each player is going to have a tech for their 5 towards DQ in the book. You'll start with an opening tip like normal, and both coaches are seat belted for the game.
You got it.
Well, now that we got the fun one out of the way. Any more questions with bench technicals and stuff like that? How's our chat looking?
Our chat's clean. Yeah, we've answered them. Keep going.
Okay. On to player technicals. Now, if you get into Rule 10, when it goes player substitute tech and you start getting into unsporting behavior and conduct and different things, that's probably your biggest section of technical fouls in the rule book. So there's a lot of difference in there. Some of them are rules that you don't have a lot you can do when they happen. You have to enforce them and do your due diligence and clean things up. Some of them you can use some preventative officiating. If you see a player getting amped up, maybe take a breath during free throws and communicate in the lane. Hey guys, we need to get it under control. You see in the picture here, and the first one's unsporting behavior. Now this is a screenshot of a play that I watched. By the end of this, the big guy for white is going to be fully straddled over top of the player that he just knocked to the floor. Not much you can do with that. And if you don't administer your technical there, your game's going to start spinning out of control, which is probably the worst case scenario. So repeated delay of game violations. One thing you can do here. So you've had the warning book for delay of game, and you're going to administer a throw in, and the team is putting a lot of pressure on the inbounder. Give a reminder, hey, you've already been warned. Make sure you don't break that plane. And you can have a little leeway there. Now, if that person guarding the inbounder reaches through and hits the ball, now you're kind of stuck. That's a technical foul, and there's not much you can do if they make contact with the ball while it's still in the inbounder's hands. As far as breaking the plane, use your voice, use the dead ball period beforehand to kind of get your way out of that one.
I think as Eric, real quickly, it's a good spot to distinguish the difference between reaching across the plane and slapping the ball out of the hands versus reaching across the plane and slapping the arm when they're holding the ball, because there's a difference there.
Yep. So those are two different fouls. If you reach through the plane and hit the ball, we have a technical foul. If you reach through the plane and make contact with the inbounder and not the ball, you have an intentional foul. The biggest difference there is, one, you get the 2 free throws, but where the ball is put back in play after the free throws. If it's an intentional foul, you're going point of interruption. If it's a technical foul, you move to half court. Now, we had a game a couple years ago that officials did a great job. It was, I think, the Southeast Showcase when they were playing it in the Civic Center, and they did a great job of bringing the inbounder. It was after a made basket, and they made contact, and the player that made contact knew they screwed up right away, and everybody was calm. But then they made sure and they put the ball in play on the baseline. So the team that just shot the 2 free throws still had to go the full 94 feet of the Civic Center floor on offense. I've seen a lot of those where the intentional foul in that situation, they inbounded at the timeline, and that's not where it goes. So just a quick reminder there. And then also, if it's an intentional foul, in theory, you could have a player get 5 intentional fouls in a game versus a technical foul, you only get 2. So
So Eric, what happens on an intentional foul and I made the basket? How many free throws do I get?
2. I had this discussion with the younger official the other day. The only time you won't shoot 2 free throws on an intentional foul is if the foul occurs on a person in the act of a 3-point shot and the shot doesn't go in. Otherwise, made basket, not made basket, it's always 2 free throws. So if it's a 3-point shot and the ball goes in and you have an intentional foul, it's a possibility of a 5-point play because they're going to get 2 free throws on the ball wherever the foul occurred. So just remember, I think we got started on that conversation because they had an intentional foul that was the 17th foul, and they asked me if they shot the 2 free throws for the intentional and then shot the bonus. I said, not if it's all the same foul. You're just going to elevate to the most penalized foul, and it's going to be one set of free throws there. So you're not going to shoot the bonus, you just shoot the intentionals.
Am I going back to the chat here? Steve Cole said, what if there are multiple dunkers? Steve, you might have to clarify what you're saying. Are you talking multiple dunkers on the same team?
Yeah, let's say you've got 3 on one side and 2 on the other. While you're trying to get the one assessed and get the player's number, his buddies start dunking too in warmups. What are you doing then with that?
I'm going to run for the car and find the closest liquor store because that game's going to be hell tonight. No, yeah. I'm joking. So you got 3 on one team, 2 on another. All right.
Yeah.
If I'm wrong here, somebody, I'm going to pull both coaches together. We're going to go with 3 techs on one team, 2 on the other, because each of those players is going to take a tech. So our team foul count will go to 3. Our team foul count goes to 2. The 2 techs on the one team will cancel out the 2 techs on the other team, but you still have 1 tech that's floating out there. You shoot that tech. And then both coaches would get an indirect. Would they get 1 indirect or do they get 3 indirects? I guess I would go with the path of least resistance, and I'm going to keep the coaches on the bench. They're both going to get 1 indirect, and they're going to be seatbelted. But Jim, MJ, I'm going to let you 2 weigh in on that.
I'm thinking.
One thing I'll say why MJ's thinking is, Steve, is once I have 1 player dunk, it's not going to be a quiet situation on the court. Everybody's going to know on that team that's not acceptable. We have a technical foul. And that way, if those other players are dunking, they're up to something other than just trying to show off their jumping skills. Once the first player dunks, we're going to go over and handle business and try to shut it down. Whether you're fully on the court or you're walking in from the corner of the gym, make it loud, make it known that you have a technical foul, and things are going to start off with an uncomfortable conversation. And most of the time, those players will stop what they're doing right then and there.
Can I add something to that, Eric?
Yeah.
Sure. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jim Herzar. I'm one of the coordinators up in northeastern Minnesota. But when we talk about the dunking situation, Eric, I'm glad you mentioned that. If somebody's close to dunking right when you come out of there, part of the reason that we're out there watching things is watching their behavior, watching their uniforms, those type of things. If somebody's close, I would catch them right away and say, hey, that was awfully close to a dunk. Hey, we can't have that out there. Let the rest of your teammates know. They usually respond pretty positive to that. And then we shut down all of this stuff that we have to go through.
Right. So, and I think, the thing about the coach, Jared, I agree. I'd take the path of least resistance. And I know we're kind of maybe kicking a dead horse here, but if you've got one player, let's say number 5 dunks twice, and you're going to tap him for 2 techs, he's gone. So he's been disqualified before the game ever starts. So I'm thinking if we assess him with 2 technicals, we have to assess 2 indirects on the coach. But I think in that instance, and Jim, you can tell me what you think. I think I would just go with the 1 indirect and get to the coach and, kill it, like Jim said, and Jared and, and Eric, try to kill it before it ever happens a second time. That's a tough way to start a game. That's going to be a tough night.
Jared, this is Gus. Would you start with a whistle? I don't believe you would, but you might.
Well, and I'll give you 2 scenarios because I had them both this year, Gus. I walk out of the locker room and I'm in the corner of McGowan Gymnasium, which is down at Winona State for a high school game, and the kid flushes the ball, breaks away the rim. As I'm stepping into the corner, I had my whistle in my hand. I blew my whistle and I assessed a technical foul from the corner of the gym, and I caught everyone's attention and I just kept walking. We didn't have any more dunks after that. We had a tech, we had the indirect on the coach, seatbelt, the whole 9 yards. And another situation I had just a week or so ago, I had a dunk and I'm out observing, and I politely, casually walked on over to the kid and I said, don't do that again. And then I brought it up at the coaches meeting and we went with the tech and so forth at the coaches meeting. So in that scenario, in scenario 1, I blew the whistle. Scenario 2, I did not. I think it's situational.
Yep, I agree with you. I agree with you, Butter.
All right. Kind of get back to player technicals here. And the dunking thing, remember too, say you have the scenario in the game, remember if we're in a dead ball period, they got to stay off the rim as well. But I kind of intentionally, when I'll just click the rest of it here. Like I said, the list of player technical fouls for behavior, for delay game violations, for unsporting fouls, or dead ball contact that's not a personal foul. So I had a situation this year where we had an intentional foul, partner hits the whistle, and then after the intentional foul, the player that got fouled took exception and they came up and they retaliate back. Once you hit your whistle to that dead ball period, if they come back and do that, while the initial one you had an intentional, dead ball retaliation is going to move to a technical foul. If you read through all the different things here and the different lists and examples they give in the rule book, there's a lot of different situations, a lot of different things to interpret. Some of them are fairly straightforward, some of them aren't. And I think the biggest thing here is the last bullet point: know the rule and its intent. We can't go out there and start calling technical fouls and guessing on those. We can't go out there and not preventative officiate and try to give a player, if we can, a chance to change their behavior before we go there. Some of them are plays and situations where it happens and you just have to move forward with the technical foul, and hopefully the player learns. Hopefully the coach can use it as a teaching moment, and hopefully everybody on the court learns something that night and the behavior gets better. But if you have a kid that commits a foul and his opponent's on the floor, like in this photo, and they straddle over top of him and stare him down, there's not one you're going to be able to preventative officiate. You just need to step up and call the technical foul, get the players separated, and hopefully the behavior changes and your game starts going down a better path. But again, we need to get in the rule book. We need to know what's going on with the intent of the rules on some of them. One example would be in the list that on an inbounds, if your inbound player purposefully and deceitfully stays out of bounds to gain an advantage over their opponent, and they run along the baseline after they throw it in out of bounds, if they're doing it on purpose to gain an advantage, now I think you're getting the intent of the rule on that. If you have a player that just throws it in and they're watching the ball and they're not going anywhere with a purpose, and they take 1 or 2 steps away from the inbound spot, but they're still out of bounds, I'm going to preventive officiate that and say, hey, get in bounds, and then talk to them during the next dead ball and kind of work my way out of it, because they weren't trying to gain an advantage there. They just were unaware of breaking any rules. Now, 2 different plays there. One was intentional and trying to gain an advantage, and that's the intent of the technical foul. The other one is just a 17-year-old kid doesn't know what's going on, and you need to try and help educate them on the rule before you maybe penalize it. Rules, knowledge, and interpretation. Again, back to that preventive officiating. Communicate with your partners. If you have something, talk during dead ball. Hey, this player is getting animated. Let's keep an eye on it. Talk to them on dead balls. Calm them down. We have here picture knowing the rules and the proper application. All of you on this Zoom meeting are here to learn. Want to learn the philosophy of officiating, the intent of the rules. There's summer camps, classroom sessions, and stuff like that. But putting yourself in the rule book, taking quizzes when they come out, watching the training videos from the state high school league. These are all things we can do. There's a lot of us on here that have been officiating a long time, and we all have learned stuff this year that we didn't know before the season started. So being a student of the game as an official never ends. And then the biggest thing too is be consistent as a crew. You need to get on the same page, especially with the technical fouls, and player behavior and coach behavior. We can't have one official that is talking coaches off the ledges the whole time, and another official that the coach barks at him once and they turn and go without a warning, call a technical foul. You need to say, hey, I gave an unofficial warning, or no, I put a warning in the book when you have a chance during a dead ball. So everybody on the crew is consistent, and that coach, if it is unsporting behavior, they're not getting away with doing the same thing 3 times to 3 officials, and they got warned on the first one, and then we weren't consistent as a crew, and we let them continue that bad behavior later either. You need to communicate with your partners and make sure we're all on the same page there. And the other thing with this too, if your partner is standing there talking to a player or a coach or having a conversation, one, maybe hold on to that ball and give them a chance. Strike up a conversation with the player that's going to inbound the ball and have a quick little small chat. And maybe if your players are getting animated, use that time to talk to the players. But what we don't want is one official talking to the coach and another official coming in and calling a tech over top of them. Watch the conversation, see how your partner's body language is, read the coach's body language. When your partner goes away and we resume play, you should have a pretty good idea of, did that conversation end under a mutual understanding, maybe not agreement, but mutual understanding of where we are in the game and how things are going to go moving forward? Or do we need to have antennas up because my partner had enough and they left the conversation because it wasn't going anywhere positive, and that coach's attitude and behavior probably isn't going to get any better. Just stand there, watch, learn, and be ready to protect your partner if you come down and that coach still is doing the same thing. Now they're doing it to you instead of them. So anybody got anything to add there?
Yes, I would use your first time out or the next time out. If you got a coach that's starting to go a little sideways, talk to your crew and see where their pulse is at on the coach's behavior. Okay. I'll give you a prime example. A couple weeks ago, I had a coach argue a travel call with my partner, 3-person crew. We're in transition. My partner is trail going to lead, and I'm lead going to trail. So I'm coming up the floor going into my trail position. I read his body language, and we're in pretty hard transition at this point. And I read his body language, and he turned around and he looked at the coach, and he went forth, continued the play. A few minutes later, we get a timeout. I go up to him. I said, hey, so that little traveling situation that coach wanted, I didn't see it. It was your primary. I'm looking off ball like I should. I said, what was the encounter? And my partner goes, I was going to warn him for his direct comment because it was below the line. I said, okay. I said, we're at a timeout. Do you want to warn him now? And he said, nope. I said, okay, yeah, fair enough. So I just put that in my head. Well, now if 5 minutes later, I got a conversation with this coach, and this coach is putting words in my mouth, and this coach is raising their voice at me. This coach gets disgusted and goes, yeah, just give me a timeout then. And I said, okay, here's your timeout. And now you've been warned. I already had going what my partner had. So use a timeout to get the pulse from your partners if you feel that a coach is going sideways, because that timeout can be, beneficial to all parties involved.
Yeah, and just to close that, don't be afraid to ask your partners, because perception is reality, right? So we might perceive things differently. So during that timeout, don't be afraid to ask your partner if you're interpreting what you're seeing correctly as well.
And on the flip side, if you warn a coach, make sure your crew knows it, because you may have warned them, like in that particular instance that Jared mentioned. If he wouldn't have picked up, his partner might have warned the coach on the way by. I warned the coach on the way by the other night, and I made sure both my partners knew it on our next dead ball. I didn't make a big deal out of it. I just said, hey, coach was warned, and they both said, yeah, we saw that. Okay, but what if they were busy, refereeing in their area and didn't pick up on it right away? I didn't put it in the book until we had a stoppage for a timeout, but the coach was well aware that they had been warned. So just make sure your crew knows it, because then there's no sense in you giving 2 or 3 warnings or, not being aware that one of your crewmates has had enough. And then we give the coach maybe too long of a leash.
And I think that's kind of a good transition to the next part of this, which is building trust. Now you see the photo here. Those are 3 gentlemen that their body language and their faces tell you they're going to have a good time tonight. They're there to work as a team. They've worked together. But the flip side of that is now in the last week, I have to sit down and I need a piece of paper to keep track of how many different partners I've worked with. So you're going to have 2 to 3 different people, different personalities coming together every night to try and officiate a game of basketball. When with all different types of experience level, different age, different backgrounds, different philosophies, and you need to come together as a crew and get on the same page. And you kind of, hopefully, if there's anything off, you can get through it and figure it out in the JV game. Sometimes we've got a double varsity with COVID. I've seen we have a lot of single varsities this year. So you got your pregame in the locker room and that to get on the same page. So here's just kind of some ideas on how to build trust. Good pregame, talk in the locker room. If you're with a crew that you haven't worked a lot with, talk about communication on the court, coverage areas, pass crash plays. There's a great pregame sheet that we have to go down the list, but then also have some conversations. Say, hey, what are your weird plays this year? You can kind of gauge by how they handle the situation, things that have happened. You can learn a lot by, well, how someone's gone through the adverse events of officiating and what they've done. Then you can kind of both get a feel for where you're at and where maybe a middle ground is if you're on different sides of it, but try to get on the same page so that you can be consistent as a crew on the court that night. On court communication. I got subs, timeout, go quickie quizzes, things like that. Eye contact before we put the ball in play, making sure we have 10 players, not 11 players or 12 players or 9 players. Saying good call after they make a foul as they're going by you to the report to the table, give them that boost of confidence, things like that. Just helps each other feel more comfortable on the court and feel like a team. Staying in your primary. I know the high school league training videos have hammered this. The goal of officiating is a crew, we want to get the plays right, but there's also a fact of there are situations that you call crew saver plays, and then there's situations where you look at it, and my partner had a great look at that play. It's in their primary. It's a one-on-one. Let them officiate their primary, and then try to match calls. If we start officiating in our partner's primary on non-crew saver plays, one, we're not going to trust each other, and it can lead to friction as a crew. And then if you have friction as a crew and you're not getting along, then the game's going to suffer, and the student athletes that we're trying to serve are going to suffer. So trying to find examples, it's tough because there's a million different scenarios out there on any given game. But if you have a ball handler that crashes into a defender and both bodies hit the floor, there's a crew saver call. That play needs a whistle. If you have a one-on-one matchup on the block and nobody hits the floor, the player elevates, they make the bucket, and maybe a little contact from the offensive player causes the defensive player to break verticality a little bit. I'm not coming all the way across the court to get that in front of my partner. They had that play from start to finish, and I caught the last half of it and saw a little bit of a break in verticality. That's not my foul to call. That's my partner's. And they may be laying off of it because the verticality was broken because of contact by the offense, and the defense didn't do anything wrong. So just thoughts there. When you do come out of your primary, be extra patient. It should feel awkward when you hit your whistle. Double whistles, there are certain situations where they're going to happen and we can't lose sleep over it. But if there's a play in front of your partner and your whistle hits at the same time that they do because you came out of your primary, those are the double whistles we don't want. Those are the ones where give your partner a chance to officiate the play and then come in and say, hey, I got to have it. We got bodies on the floor. We had illegal contact, and we go from there. But it's a tough thing to do, and it's going to be a struggle, I think, maybe now for us as we're transitioning. I know for a lot of years we've all worked 2-person game most of the regular season, and then we get to postseason and we get more 3-person games. But now as we have more 3-person, our primary areas have shrunk a little bit. We need to kind of refocus where our vision is when the ball's out of our primary, and kind of learn a new coverage area per se, to retrain ourselves so that we're letting the idea of a 3-person crew come to fruition. The idea is to help us all cover the court better so that we don't have to try and cover so much area. And then we have a better officiated game because we have 3 sets of eyes out there with good judgment. So with that, know your partner's angle. If they can see the player, they can't. If it's an out of bounds call, if your partner hits the whistle and yells help, just make the call. If you have a tip or something on a rebound and the other team tipped out from behind, come together and talk. Your partner may have passed on a small foul and just gave the ball back to the team. You can't communicate that from 30 feet away. You need to come together and talk, say, hey, what'd you have? And they're going to say, I didn't have a great look. Do you have something different? Yep, switch it, send the ball the other way. Nope, I had a little bit of a push. We're going to stay here. Okay, good. If you guys come together as a crew and talk, there's not much the coach can argue with anymore. You had your discussion and you came out of it as a crew and said, this is where we're going with the ball. So, and there again, just be ready to help if they ask on the out of bounds. And we've kind of hammered this a couple times tonight, the quickie quizzes on the timeouts. Get on the same page, say what needs to be said so you're ready for what's going to happen on the court after the timeout. I don't know where we're at in the chat, but questions, more thoughts?
We're good on the chat. Just for clarity, Jim and I were having a little conversation on the side here. On the question about the multiple dunks, and I know that we kind of kicked that, but in the event that you do have that, like Jim said, be preventative. Like Jared shared, if you got 1 foot on the court and 1 foot out in the hallway yet, come and get it and take care of it. But if you do have multiple ones, and I have seen that, it does count as multiple indirects towards the coach. And remember, so if you have two dunks by the same player or 2 different players on the same team, they're each going to be assessed that technical, and or if it's the same player, 2 technicals, and that player could be gone if it's the same player, but that coach is going to start the game with 2 indirects. So, and of course, 3 indirects, the coach is going to go home too. So again, prevention is key here. But just for clarity, Jim and I were looking it up and making sure that we were right on that before we commented on that. So that is a true statement.
I've got a situation that happened last week, and as a displacement of a free throw shooter. Let's see your guys' take on this one. Front end of a 1-and-1. My partner called displacement, called a foul. And then he came up with 2 shots right away. And so it was right before half. So we got to halftime. And I think we should have cleared the lane, finished the first 1-and-1, and then came back for the second 1-and-1 as it was 8th team foul. Would that have been the correct way to manage that situation?
So just so we have the play right, bonus free throw, shot goes up, shooter gets displaced, ball goes in. So they make the first one to be awarded the second one on the first set of bonus. Okay.
Correct. And he comes up and he was really adamant. He said, no, two more free throws. He just came up right away, 2 free throws. And then as I said, we talked about it at halftime, and he seemed to think that what I said made sense. But again, I just want to hear your thoughts.
Well, you still got to award the second bonus free throw, right?
Right.
Yeah, and then you're going to have go ahead.
Would you clear the lane for that second one?
It's going to be the same shooter, correct?
Right.
If it was a different shooter, then I say 100% yes, you clear the lane. But with it being the same shooter, I don't know, because that's a very rare one. But
yeah, I don't think it matters.
I guess in the essence, knowing that next we know by rule that second free throw of the first bonus is a dead ball free throw, right? There's no action that can happen after that because we have to shoot free throws after that.
Correct.
And then it could be live after that next 1-and-1.
So my thought is, I got a little bit longer to think about it too, is is you probably, let's flip the scenario and say, as the shot's in the air, you have offensive player in the second lane space commits a pushing foul, and we're going to go have bonus free throws on the other end. You would clear the lane and shoot one there to finish the first bonus free throws, right?
Correct.
So I would probably clear it just to make sure we don't have any more common fouls happen off the first set of bonus free throws. And then we're live on the next set of bonus free throws. But
Makes sense. Yep.
I'm not 100% either.
It's a unique one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's correct, Eric and Tristan. That's what I would do. I just wondered, Rich, you said your partner came in and said 2 free throws.
Yeah, he
So
had
it
said
should
he
just
had,
been a bonus, correct? Because they,
right. That's what I explained to him at halftime. Yeah, he said, I just had this, and a veteran official told me it was 2 free throws in that situation. I'm like, well, I don't think so, because really you penalize the offensive team there, or potentially
Right.
penalize them.
right, unless you deem it intentional, and then that's a
Right.
whole, that changes our status. That changes everything. So I
Right.
would just, that's a live ball foul because the shot's on the way. And you're just gonna call personal foul for the contact. And, then we're bonus unless we're 9 to 10, right,
Right.
on the bonus. But
Yep.
if you call it intentional, which I've seen happen occasionally, then that changes everything, right? But
Correct.
yeah, I would clear the lane, shoot it, bring everybody back. I agree.
Thank you.
Yeah, good situations to talk about. Strange but true, and they do happen, right? When we least expect them.
Anyone else got any other situations or scenarios?
Kristen, I think I could maybe add one, and it maybe pertains to, excuse me, some of the things that we talked about before. Eric talked about communication. And I've had several calls about administering or saying 2 free throws when it's a 1-and-1 and those type of situations. Part of that comes in, we can help ourselves a lot if we communicate. Once the person who reports to the scorer lets the score table know it's 2 shots or 1-and-1, whatever it is, they should turn to their partner, especially lead who's administering, and letting them know, hey, it's 2 shots or 1-and-1, whatever the situation is. And lead should also look at C if we're in 3-person and confirm with them. If we have all 3 on the same page, we're not going to make those type of mistakes. I've had several questions on those this year. I think that would just cut down on that a lot. I had one other situation. Oh, and by the way, Rich, I would agree with you on your situation with the fall on the free throw. And Eric's situation, if we had another fall on a successful 1-and-1 and a fall after that, clear the lane so we don't have any more chance of something coming up. We have a dead ball, and then shoot that 1-and-1 that follows and bring the players back. And then one more situation I had was, we talked about coach technical, giving a technical. I know you have the screenshot on there of that. I can remember back when I first started officiating, when I gave a coach, he deserved a T, but I was mad when I gave it to him. And I think we as an officials have to be in a calming manner in that situation. And I think I learned from that one. And so if you can keep your calm and calmly administer, hey, that's a T on the coach for unsporting conduct, and report it to the bench calmly, I think that helps diffuse those type of situations as well. So those are just some of my thoughts on our conversations here.
One thing I'll add on that is you want to be a calming influence. If you get to a quickie quiz on a timeout and your partner says, yeah, I warned that coach, he's using a bunch of explicitives, start calming your partner down. You use a preventative manner there to get your partner back to a calm place. They may not show it to the coach, but if you see your partner getting animated, calm them down, maybe rotate them to the other side of the floor so they're not in front of the bench. You want to make sure that you're doing everything you can so that if you do get to the technical foul, like Jim said, you don't want to be the emotional one in the situation. So as a crewmate, if you see your partner getting badgered for 3 trips up and down the floor, the next dead ball, whether you're supposed to rotate or not, get them out of there. Put somebody else in there. Let the coach talk to somebody else, diffuse the situation, and you can help yourself out as a crew that way too.
Yeah, and by sharing all these different experiences that we've had and talking about them, that's how it makes the association better as well. Granted, we all have different stories and different situations. Excuse me. But by sharing those and talking about it amongst our groups, we all have different groups people we officiate with on a Tuesday night's different than someone on Thursday and Friday, and that's only going to make everybody better when we learn from the different situations that we're all faced with when we're out there running up and down the floor together.
Any more questions? We're at 8:05 and we kind of promised everybody we'd keep these to an hour this year. We're all devoting a lot of time to the games themselves, so we appreciate everyone showing up for these and asking questions. Again, just closing thoughts is work as a crew. Let your partners do their job. Make sure you're doing your job. Make sure we're officiating the heck out of dead ball situations so things don't blow up on us. And Butson put it in the chat, and I think it's key as we go into the last few weeks of the regular season, kill everybody with kindness. So we're winding down and we're all probably a little tired, but we still need to give these kids the experience that they deserve and make it a fun and exciting one, and make sure we're doing our best effort to make that happen. So
Yep, I'll just add, Eric, too. I think, like you said, the season's winding down a little bit and we're gearing up towards our playoffs, but people are, a little tired and of the grind, but stick with the plan and stick with your regular mechanics. And I noticed, we talked the other day and at halftime in one of our games, we didn't have whistles on all our subs. Some of our tables are getting tired. They're not as sharp as they were at the beginning of the season. We're not getting horns from them. So, when we put a whistle on a sub and bring them in, that tells me as the lead, administering a free throw, don't get in a hurry. Something's going on the court. Those kind of things that we kind of get in a routine, and we've been doing it for 3 months now. That can get us in the soup by not, being observant. So just slow down. Good communication by using the same mechanics and using, your whistle as you need to, and just taking your time and making sure that you're being a good communicator with everybody in your crew on the court and your table crew. So like we mentioned earlier, a good table can keep you out of the soup as well.
I don't think we're as tight as your cat though, MJ.
I don't think he's real tired. He's getting a good snooze in. Last time we had this meeting, he fell off the back, so.
all right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. Enjoy what's left of Sunday evening, and good luck out there on the court.
Great job, guys. Great job.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Eric,
Yep.
Tristan.
Thanks,
Thanks for
Tristan.
putting it together.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.